Hello, my friends, and welcome to Imagine If, where I show you all the many possibilities of different timelines and stories, where we experience how different characters are going through their different paths than the ordinary. For the past few weeks, I've often pondered on what other fascinating stories I should show and tell you all. I was also thinking about making my own stories to tell you all, and I have made one just now. I have seen over the years on how there have been three Peter Parkers who each endured and went through their own lives, going through hard challenges and obstacles to be the masked heroes they are known today as Spider-Man. I had a dream where I made my own story of Peter Parker being Spider-Man and how his life would be when he faces many foes and complications. I say, imagine if there was a fourth Spider-Man, whom I call the Sensational Spider-Man. This is the first story of the whole legacy of this universe's Peter Parker. I will be using villains and characters that haven't been seen much or have never been put in the story. This will be a multiple episode series. So sit back, get the snacks and drinks you need as we explore this new beginning on another friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. This first part of the legacy, the Sensational Spider-Man, goes to Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, the creators of Spider-Man. This is the first story of the Sensational Spider-Man, part 1 of 4. Location, the Parker residence. Time, 7:25 a.m. It is the first day of Midtown High, basically the first day of high school. Young 15-year-old Peter Parker is woken up by his Uncle Ben Parker. Ben tells Peter, "Come on, Sonny, you're going to be late for your first day of school, so get up. May is getting breakfast downstairs." Peter smiles as he gets his glasses on his desk that was beside his bed. He puts them on and he gets up to change, also getting his things for school. He then heads downstairs to eat breakfast with his loving guardians. Uncle Ben is on a chair reading a newspaper from the greatest newspaper brand in all of Manhattan, the Daily Bugle. Aunt May placed a plate of 5 wheat cakes on the table, which had a glass of milk and fruit on the side. She told Peter, "Breakfast is ready." Peter placed his backpack beside him as he sat down. While he was eating breakfast, he got a call on his phone. He looked on the screen of his phone, seeing one of his best friends was calling him. It was Harry Osborn. He answered and Harry asked, "Are you ready for the best first day of school, high school?" Peter answered, "Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm also excited to see Gwen again after a few long months." Harry laughed over the phone and said, "You're never going to give that up, are you, Pete?" Peter said, "You're never going to let me think what I want to think, are you?" Harry laughed again while saying, "Never. Do you need a lift? My treat." Peter said as he was putting down his glass of milk, "Sure, thanks, Harry." Harry said to him, "Don't worry, it's no big deal. See you in a couple." Peter said goodbye and ended the call, continuing to eating his breakfast. As the couple of minutes passed, the door received a knock. Uncle Ben answered, and it was Harry. Harry said to Ben and May, "Hey, Mr. and Mrs. Parker, it's great to see you again." He turned and asked Peter, "Ready to go, Pete?" Peter got his backpack and headed out the door. Peter said his goodbyes to his guardians, and the two went into the car. As Peter and Harry got in, Peter was welcomed by the Osborns' butler, Bernard. Bernard said, "Hello, Mr. Parker. How are you doing?" Peter answers with his seatbelt buckled, "I'm doing wonderful. How's Norman doing at Oscorp?" But Harry became silent, telling Peter, "My father has been busy a lot over the summer, and he rarely spent time with me. I had to find my own way of fun since my mom was on a business trip for Dad." Peter wrapped his arm around Harry and said, "Now that we're back together, we could spend more time, like how we used to all those years ago." Harry smiled and said, "Thanks, Pete. I really did miss you." Location, Midtown High School. Time, 7:46 a.m. Bernard drops Peter and Harry off at the front of the school. The two looked at the headline of the school and then at each other. They both nodded and started to walk inside. As the two were going into the school, they heard a honk behind them. They both turned around and saw a police car drive near the curb. The passenger door opened and they saw that it was Gwen Stacy. "Thanks for giving me a lift, Dad," Gwen said as she was looking at her father, Captain George Stacy. Captain Stacy said back, "Of course, Gwen. Have a good first day. Be careful." Gwen closed the door and saw Peter and Harry. She ran to them and embraced them, saying, "Oh, I missed you both dearly, especially you, Peter." Peter stood there hesitant, honestly not knowing what to say. Harry could see Peter's cheeks light up red. Harry said with a laugh, "What? It was just a compliment. What are you scared to admit it too?" Gwen gave Peter the curious look, and Peter felt embarrassed and awkward about what Harry just said. Harry turned to Gwen and said, "Who knows, maybe he has the hots for you." Peter pushed Harry from behind and said, "Oh, knock it off, Harry." The three laughed and went into the school as the bell rang. As they were all going to their different classes, they heard from above, "Good morning, old and new students of Midtown High. This is your principal speaking. I am honored to be here with you today, and I got an exciting announcement to make. All the first-year students, when it is the end of the school, everyone meet in Mr. Warren's classroom. See you later, and have a good first day of school." Peter's first class was science, which was, of course, his favorite subject. As he is trying to find his seat, he feels a push behind him, making him fall to the ground. All eyes were on him. He turns to see that it was Flash Thompson, an enemy of his that first started at the end of elementary school. And with him was his girlfriend, Liz Allen, and their friend, Sally Avriel. Flash says as he is looking down, "Oh, hey, bookworm, didn't see you there since you are so small." He, Liz, and Sally laughed and pointed their fingers at Peter as Peter was getting up. Liz says to Flash as her arms are around him, "Oh, you're a scream, Flash." Flash giggles and says to her as they are going to their seats, "I sure am, doll. Move, Parker, don't you see I have some ladies that need a tough guy like me around?" Flash pushes Peter with his shoulder, and they just laughed and scoffed. Peter sighs and says to himself as he is going to a seat that was a few rows east from the door, "I really wanted a clean start for this year, but of course Flash Thompson and his new friends want to ruin it for me." He sits next to a goth girl that was also her first day of school as well. She wore all black with black makeup around her eyes. She was just on her phone and not paying attention to anything at all. Peter recognized her. This was Jessica Jones, a very quiet one. Peter puts his backpack down by his seat and he looks over to her. He said to her with a smile, "Hey, I'm Peter Parker. We probably haven't met, but I remember you. It's your first day of school so far, right? Are you enjoying it?" Jessica looked at Peter, and in a matter of moments, she was back on her phone doing her thing. Peter shrugged it off as the school bell rang. Location, cafeteria. Time, 12:20 a.m. Peter has his tray of food, and he is walking through the aisles of tables to find his friends. He eventually finds them moments later and sits with them, exchanging stories on how their first day was going so far. And while they were having their conversation, a football hit Peter's lunch. Some of the food went onto Peter's shirt. Flash came forth and picked up the football. He says, "Sorry, dork, guess I gotta practice my aim to be on the football team." Flash turned and gave Liz and Sally the hand signal for Peter, calling him crazy. Liz and Sally just giggled as they were across from each other. Peter felt such a loser that he got up and left without telling Gwen and Harry where he was going. They went after him to give him a hand with the struggle, but he just vanished into the crowd. He went outside and sat by a bush, crying. He said to himself as he was cleaning his glasses, Flash and everyone else around here that calls me in many cruel ways are gonna pay. They'll see. Someday. Location, Mr. Warren's lab. Time, 2:45 p.m. This was it. The time when all the first-year students of Midtown High are going to see what Mr. Miles Warren has been researching. Mr. Warren said to all the students that were behind him as he was walking to his closet, "Now stay close, because what you are about to see is one of the greatest experiments I have ever done in my career." Everyone saw as Mr. Warren opened the doors of the closet and an extra room appeared. Flash said as his eyes were big, "It's like magic." Mr. Warren said to Flash, "Magic, my young friend, is just science we do not yet understand." Mr. Warren led the students into the laboratory with two of Mr. Warren's scientist helpers making sure everything was in order. Peter and his friends looked at all of the amazing inventions of Mr. Warren's career, while Flash and his friends were just in the back, not quite with the group. Mr. Warren stopped in front of two pillars. He turned to the group and said, "Boys and girls, what you are about to see is my breakthrough in the science of radiation, transporting it and changing it in a way that could prevent cancer from spreading." Peter, Harry, and Gwen had the front row seats to see all that Mr. Warren was doing. Mr. Warren pulled out an ill rat and put it in a capsule. He then went to the side of one pillar and typed in the exact calculations to not mess this up. While all of this was getting ready, there, above the narrow space of the two pillars, a spider was making its web. Mr. Warren said, "Feast your eyes upon the miraculous." Mr. Warren flipped a switch, and the two pillars shot radiation against each other. Everyone gave an oohs and ahs as they saw what was taking place in front of their eyes. The ignition of the experiment made the room shake, and the spider fell into the narrow space where it got struck by the radiation. The radiation pointed down and went into the container the ill rat was in. The spider flew back towards one of the students, and that student was Peter. The spider landed onto Peter's arm and crawled its way to his hand with the last bit of strength it had left. At a last attempt, the spider bit his hand. Peter felt the pain on his hand and smacked it. He felt a woozy feeling in his hand, along with the extreme heat of the radiation. He put his hand on his head as he started to feel very dizzy. Gwen sees Peter in this condition and asks him, Peter, are you alright?" Harry sees this too and says as he takes Peter's arm, "I think Peter needs some air." Gwen and Harry help Peter get out of there as the pillars shut down, with the students gasping in shock as the rat is no longer ill. Peter is escorted outside by the carpool lane. Peter is put down on a bench and is slowly gaining his consciousness. Harry asks Peter as he and Gwen sit with him, "Are you all right, Pete? You really worried us in there." Peter took his glasses off and rubbed his eyes as if he were exhausted. He says, "I don't really know. Everything was fine until I felt a pain in my head." He looked at his hand, seeing the bite swell a little bit. Gwen sees it as well and asks him, do you need the school nurse?" Peter shakes his head and says as he is putting his glasses back on, No, Gwen, it really isn't necessary. I feel all right already." When Peter had his glasses back on, he noticed that everything was blurry all of a sudden. He took them off, finding out that he didn't really need to put them back on. He found this very strange. Peter and his friends heard Flash's voice say behind them, "Does Parker need his beauty sleep?" Sally says, "Yeah, does he need a love's kiss to wake up later on?" They all laughed as they got closer to where Peter and his friends were sitting. Peter says with annoyance, "You just never leave me alone, do you, Flash?" Flash says, "Oh, don't be such a poor sport, lame-o." Harry got up and told Flash with anger, "You've been bothering us all day, Flash, so why don't you take your so-called life back where you came from?" Liz and Sally stood back as Flash's face went from cool to anger. Flash grabbed Harry by the shirt and said, "No one tells me what to do, rich boy." Gwen got up and tried to get Flash off of Harry while telling Flash to stop, but Flash just pushed her back. Flash held out a fist and was going to give Harry a knuckle sandwich. Peter quickly jumped over the bench and grabbed Flash's fist before Flash could land a punch. Peter didn't notice the strength he had just now. Flash let loose on Harry and quickly pushed Peter back, while massaging his fist from the hard squeeze. He says to Peter, "I didn't know you had the guts for all these years, Peter Parker." Flash raised his fists and said, "You ain't gonna be around with anyone tomorrow because no one cares for you. It's a fact, Parker. You're nothing." Liz and Sally just watched, surprised to ever see Peter have the guts to stand up to Flash. Flash charged at Peter to try and tackle him down, but Peter did a backflip into the air. Flash missed his opportunity, and he saw Peter land behind him. Peter paused, wondering how in the world he even did that. Was it from Mr. Warren's laboratory? Peter asked himself. Flash charged again with fist out. Peter felt a sudden buzz in his head, like it was a warning to duck. Peter quickly turned around in a blink of an eye and grabbed Flash's fist. Flash tried to punch Peter with his other fist, but Peter grabbed the other also, slowly crushing Flash's fists. Flash tried everything he could to break free, but he was just too weak. Peter eventually let loose on Flash, and he was afraid. He didn't know what was happening to him, so he decided to make a run for it. Harry called out to him, "Pete, where are you going?" Harry and Gwen went after him, while trying to call his name over and over, but Peter was just too fast. They couldn't catch up. As Peter was crossing the street, a bus came rushing in, honking its horn. Peter felt a warning to move out of the way, and he did. Gwen says to Peter, "Look out!" The bus came rushing past, and when Gwen and Harry were able to see the sidewalk across the street, Peter was nowhere to be seen. They continued to find him, but they had no luck. Peter opened his eyes and found that he was high up in the air, with his hands and feet sticking to the wall. He yelled out, "What is happening to me?" He started to look around and was able to find Gwen and Harry off in the distance, still looking for him. Peter looked up and started to climb, trying to figure out what all just happened recently. As he was climbing, he remembered the radiation experiment, being bitten by something that had some of the radiation in it, standing up against Flash, and now this. He made it to the top of the roof and grabbed onto a metal pole to help him get support, but it was crushed like it was simple paper. Peter said in shock, "I got incredible strength. I didn't even put much force into it." Before Peter could get up, the metal pole broke off from being crushed, and Peter started to fall. He screamed as he was trying to find a way to save himself. As he was freaking out over this, he shot out a long line of clear web string. It connected onto the building he fell off of, and he was dangling in the air. He slowly started to climb the web, saying that he was moving much faster than any guy of his age. When he made it to the rooftop at last, he looked at his wrist that the clear web lining came out of. He said as he was walking around, I climb like a spider, shoot webs like a spider, have the speed of a spider, have incredible strength like a spider, and have a thing in my head that warns me of danger. What else do I have?" Over the past 30 minutes, Peter started to experiment on what he could do with these new powers. He also found out that he had great agility, that he could move around in numerous directions to give him the upper hand of doing flips and other sorts of tricks. He swung through the city after he learned how to properly shoot and aim his wrists to web swing. Peter eventually came to the conclusion, when going further downtown, that it was a spider that had the radiation from Mr. Warren's experiment. The spider bit him, which resulted in all of this miraculous things that have happened. As he was heading back home, he asked himself, "I have such great potential and skill to use it in a way, but what should I use it for? To try it out?" As he is over the streets of New York, he hears a newspaperman yell out, "Wrestling match with the heavyweight champion Crusher Kane. Masked wrestlers needed to be allowed in the ring. When you enter and beat Crusher Kane, you could get $1,000. Peter swung by without anyone noticing and grabbed a newspaper. He sat against the wall and opened the newspaper, seeing a picture of Crusher Kane in the ring. He smiles at an idea. He got his phone and typed in the code to get into the wrestling match and the address to where this was taking place. This is the perfect way to try these powers out. Gotta find a disguise. I'll head back home and find something good. He folded the newspaper up and Webb swung back to the Parker residence. Location, Parker residence. Time, 4:20 p.m. When Peter was back home, he came through the front door. Uncle Ben and Aunt May welcomed him home. Uncle Ben asks Peter while patting him on the back, "So, how was your first day of school?" Peter took his backpack off and said, "It was very good, actually. Talking to Harry and Gwen again, new teachers, new classes. Yeah, I'm going to go to my room. I want to check something out." As Peter is going upstairs, Aunt May asks him, "Where are your glasses?" Peter turned and said with a smile, "Oh, I actually don't need them." "I'm fine, Aunt May. It's nothing to be worried about." Peter made it into his room and closed the door, locking it. He opened some drawers and looked at his old clothes to try and think of something simple, maybe something good that could definitely keep his identity secret. He got a pile of clothing and put it on his bed, picking out the clothing he needed to make a suit. He also got out a sheet of paper and began drawing out ideas. He went on and on for an hour or two, making his designs for his wrestling suit. He got a couple of red clothes and sewed them together and cut in a couple of holes so that he would be able to see while in the ring. He got his mask on, with his red shirt that had on the front and back of it the symbol of a spider. He said as he checked himself out in the mirror, "Yeah, this could do. In the ring, I'll be known as Spider-Human." Peter paused and said, "Spider-Human? No. I gotta think of something better, a better name. Maybe Human Spider? No. That is much more worse." Peter was very troubled to figure out a name. He was all prepared on the costume, but he doesn't even have a name. He snapped his fingers and said, "I know, Spider-Man." He did a flip and landed on the ceiling, loving the name. He said as he was looking out the window, "Yeah, that is a good name. The Sensational Spider-Man." After saying that, he hears a knock from the door. He gets startled in fear and he falls on the floor. Aunt May says, "Peter, what was that thud? Are you all right?" Peter quickly got his mask off and changed into a different shirt. He quickly put his costume into his backpack and went to the door. He unlocked the door and said to Aunt May, Oh no, Aunt May, I'm all fine. I just tripped because I was startled by your knocking on my door." Aunt May felt ashamed for this and said, "Well, I'm sorry, dear. You've been up here for almost 2.5 hours. What are you doing?" Peter turned around to see if he was clear, and he said with a forcible smile, "Oh, nothing, just an experiment for science class." Aunt May smiled and patted Peter on the cheek. She says, "Oh, you remind me so much like Ben. Always determined. Anyways, I just wanted to tell you that Uncle Ben wants you to help him with moving things in the garage." Peter says while closing his door, "Okay, Aunt May, tell Uncle Ben that I'll be down in a minute." Peter got out his costume and put it on, then put his regular clothes over it to keep it hidden from his Uncle Ben and Aunt May. He opened his window and jumped out, landing on his 2 feet. He was in front of the opening of the garage, and he went in. He asked Uncle Ben as he was moving old boxes of material, "What can I do to help, Uncle Ben?" Uncle Ben sees Peter and says, "Oh, quick timing, Peter. You are quick on your feet. Could you help me pull out these boxes of things that we don't use anymore?" Peter nods and begins to work, pulling out boxes of memories and items from back in Uncle Ben and Aunt May's day. As he is going through one of the boxes, he comes across an old locket that had the initials P.P. He picks it up and asks Uncle Ben, "Uncle Ben, what what, 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 what is this locket? It has my initials on it. Uncle Ben sees the locket and he pauses. He says to Peter as he gets a closer look at it, "Oh, of course. I forgot that I made a promise to show you this when you were of age. Looks like that time is now." Uncle Ben takes the locket out of Peter's hand and opens it. He turns the opening of the locket to Peter, and it was a picture of a husband and wife. Peter asks, "Who are they?" Uncle Ben says as he is putting the opened locket into Peter's hand, "Those are your parents, Richard and Mary Parker. They were such good people, but also busy as well." Peter sees how he had his father's face and had his mother's eyes. He asks his Uncle Ben, what happened to them? Uncle Ben takes a seat, and Peter could see that his uncle is having a hard time saying it. All Uncle Ben could say was, "They were gone when you were just an infant. They wanted us to raise you, not wanting you to go through orphanage. They loved you, Peter. They loved you so much. They wished they had more time for you, but life went by quickly." Uncle Ben could see in Peter's eyes that he felt like he discovered a sad, in art, a body that used to have beauty in it, like in basically an archaeological body. Uncle Ben says to Peter as he's getting up to move more stuff, "I know it is a lot to take in. You can go inside if you need to. I'll take care of all of this." He gets to work on sorting out things to give away as Peter is walking out of the garage, still looking at the locket of his parents. He never knew he had actual parents. He thought his Uncle Ben and Aunt May were basically his parents. He jumped to his window and went inside. He put the locket down onto his desk. He couldn't believe how much more of a discovery he is having. First the spider bite, then the powers, and now this? His parents that he has never heard of before. He decided to get his mind off of that and focuses on going to that wrestling match. He went and told his Aunt May and Uncle Ben as Ben came back inside. Hey, I just want to tell you guys, I'm gonna go for a walk." Aunt May asks Peter, are you certain you don't need a lift or anything?" Peter opens the door and says with a smile, "No, Aunt May, I'll be fine. But thank you. I'll be back in about an hour." When Peter went through the opened door and closed it behind him, he made his way downtown, following the address he got down from the newspaper. He couldn't wait to give the wrestling match a shot. Location: Secret Wrestling Building. Time: 5:55 p.m. He arrives at the front door, and when he knocks on the door cracks open a little. A deep voice asks him, "What are you here for, kid?" Peter says as he is pulling out the code to show the man to participate in the wrestling match. The man sees the code and says, "Only masked wrestlers are allowed to participate. Good day." The door closed, and Peter was annoyed. He knew that the man was right. It did say that masked wrestlers were needed. So he went into the darkness of one of the alleyways and took his clothes off to show his wrestling outfit. He went to the door again and knocked on it. The door cracked open, and the man saw the masked wrestler with the code. The man opens the door fully, and Peter is given access. The first thing Peter noticed in the building was the smell of cigarettes. He tastes the bitterness and burning of it. He says to himself as he's going through the doors on where the wrestling area was at, "Hope I don't get sick from the stench. It's not good for me or anyone." When Peter opened the doors, he saw hundreds of people cheering and shouting for the brawl that was taking place in the middle of the giant room. Crusher Kane gives his masked opponent the crowbar move and then flips the man forward, giving the man a headache that he'll feel tomorrow. The crowd cheers and says, Crusher Kane, we love you." The referee yells out, "Crusher Kane wins again." Peter takes a big gulp as he sees how built and big this Crusher Kane guy was. The announcer enters the ring and says, "Who has the guts to try and take on our champion to try and win $1,000? Whoever has the guts, sign up on the room on your right." Peter sees on his right, behind the chairs, the room where it shows a sign that said in bold, "Sign-ups." Peter goes in and he signs up, feeling that confidence and determination that he'll win this match. A few minutes passed, and the announcer said in the ring with the microphone, "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a brave challenger that is willing to do what he can to try and win $1,000. Please give it up for whom he calls himself the Sensational Spider-Man." The announcer points at the curtains that were behind him, and spotlights turn on, showing Peter. Peter was expecting applause or something good, but it was a whole bunch of boos. Peter walks toward the ring, trying not to let the adrenaline get into him. He's got this. He gets into the ring and Crusher Kane tells him, "You are going down, little shrimp." Peter and Crusher Kane go to the middle of the ring, each across from the announcer. The announcer says, "For this, you may use any tactic of wrestling that you know of. No kicking or punching in the you-know-where. Let the match begin." The announcer got out of the ring as Peter walked back to a corner of the ring. Crusher Kane was across the stage, and he was cracking his knuckles. He says to Peter, "Hey, Spider-Man, I'll go easy on you, unless you're chicken." The bell rang and Kane came running towards Peter as the crowds were cheering. Peter quickly jumped over Kane and kicked Kane to the corner where he came from. Kane turns to him and says, "You're a quick one. I guess I shouldn't go easy." Kane charges again and is going to give Peter a punch to the face, but Peter grabs Kane's arm and goes behind Kane, making the chicken wing move. Peter learned this move as he was signing up. He didn't really want to hurt the guy. He doesn't really want to cause anyone to go to the hospital. Part of the crowd started to shout out, "Go Spider-Man!" Peter pushed Kane and Kane fell to the stage, face first. Kane gets back up and says, "That's it." He tripped Peter and Peter fell back. Kane grabbed both of Peter's legs, lifted him up, and slammed him on the stage. Peter was stunned by this attack. He was trying to gain his consciousness. Kane climbed onto the corner of the ring and was going to make a jump to give Peter his famous finishing blow, which he called the Kane Crackler. He was going to aim for Peter's ribs. Before Kane could jump, Peter quickly shot out a web at Kane's face and pulled him down. Kane fell onto the stage with the web still on his face. Peter picked him up and threw him to the ground hard, knocking Kane out. The referee came in and slammed his fist onto the stage 3 times. After that, the referee raises Peter's hand in the air and yells out, "We have our winner, Spider-Man." The crowd cheered and screamed for Spider-Man's victory. The announcer comes into the ring and says as he's shaking Spider-Man's hand, "Congratulations, you not only got $1,000, but are now the new champion." Peter looks around him and sees everyone cheer for him with their hands out showing the spider hand sign. They loved him. One of the men that has a cigarette in his hand sees him, and he says, "This might be the guy we are looking for." A few minutes later, Peter is out of the wrestling room, signing autographs for his new fans. The announcer gave Peter the $1,000. Before Peter could leave, he hears someone say to him, "Spider-Man, wait!" Peter turns to see the man with the cigarette in his hand. The man says, "Spider-Man, that was incredible work you have done in there. Such agility, such flexibility. I just wanted to tell you that I have a proposal for you." Peter asks with interest, "What proposal?" The man pulls out a card and says, "I work with a company that is well known on every television set that is in this city. Come, work for me, give it a try, and I can make you famous, make you rich. You got skills, kid. When you have the time, give me a call." Peter takes the card and the man puts out a hand. He shakes it and says, "I will, sir." The man says as he is leaving, looking forward to seeing you tomorrow at 3 o'clock. Keep the mask on when you arrive. People do love that curious suspense. Peter looked at the card and he put it in his pocket. He says as he's walking out, "Could this be my destiny? I could pay off Uncle Ben and Aunt May's bills for good. We could be rich." Peter went into the alleyway where his clothes were and he put them back on. He took his mask off and he walked back home, feeling that the future was bright. The story will be continued in part 2.